Bully Ball. I'm Jason Aponte, joined by Steph Sanchez on the Gold Standard Podcast Network. Steph, moreover, before we get into the draft, how are you? You look great.
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you. I missed you, man. I feel like we hadn't talked in a while. So definitely excited to talk 49ers draft, kickers, all of it with you.
See, and you had to go there.
I
And that's why I
did.
was going to say, like, you don't miss me. You miss me getting upset. You don't miss me. You knew exactly what you were
Well,
doing
you
when you
getting
were.
upset is you.
I am a generally upset person. Let's put it out on the table. Let's put it on the table. I generally get upset at things. I'm a passionate person, very passionate. A
Yeah.
lot of the reason that people dislike me or like me is because I'm passionate. And I will continue to be that because I can't change that. But regardless, passion, anger, doesn't matter. The 49ers have a full draft class, and they didn't take 11 players this time, Steph, out of the 11 picks that they had. They took 9. And that was the result of a trade up to, I believe it was pick 87, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
Okay. Pick 87. They were originally supposed to start with 99. I guess that's the best place to start is where are we with each player? 87, Jair Brown, Penn State. Steph, initial thoughts.
I liked this pick actually. I felt like okay, we're getting the draft started like off right. I felt like this was a good pick, and it just like I thought it was pretty good value at this point in the draft as well. Sure, they moved up, but clearly this was a guy that they really liked. Offhand, you could tell what they like about him. Just he was a leader on that Penn State defense. They did need a safety. Well, I would argue that they didn't need a safety because Tashawn Gibson did have 1 year left. So they could have, waited another year to try to get a safety. But I like this move regardless because, I think having a safety that can learn a year under Tashawn Gibson is going to be nice. And this also feels like a Steve Wilks pick. This was the first draft with Steve Wilks being the defensive coordinator, and we knew he was going to have an extra hand in trying to build up the secondary, and in particular the secondary depth, which is something that the 49ers needed to address in this draft. And so I definitely liked this move right off the bat. I think it was a strong pick.
Yeah, and I like the confidence in trading up for this pick. It means you identified him, you realized what you wanted. I love that. See, I have I guess I'm trying to use conviction in the right way for once. But I enjoy the conviction in a player that you identified with his traits. And I think you're right. The 49ers have kind of built this roster out with guys who may not contribute in year one, fill an absolutely perfect role for this team. And that's what he does, right? You lose Jimmy Ward. Jimmy Ward's a bit of a Swiss Army knife. He's played down in the slot and everything as well, too. I understand Isaiah Oliver's here, but Jair Brown can do it all. Play up high, play down low. He's fast, straight like to the ball. His straight line speed in recovery isn't exactly as great as you would think. But at the same time, for me, I feel like this was a smash pick because the 49ers front office identified it. And I love this. I loved it. I love when this team says, you know what, we're going to give up some of these picks and we're going to move up for a guy that we love. And it is a position of need. So Sean Gibson's here for one more year. He can mentor the young man, and then you can get two guys who fit themselves. I feel like Hufanga and Brown are ball hawks, are guys who are fast. They have a little bit to learn in terms of the subtleties of route running and maybe what teams are trying to do. That's fine. Hufanga was an all-pro. Took him a year to pick that up. I feel like this is a similar pick in that way. And if the 49ers are going to have a drop-off a bit in terms of pass rush, then you need to have coverage on the back end. I really, really enjoyed this pick. I really did.
Yeah, and also, I think Brown has experience being a single high safety, taking care of the back end. And that's something that, we've called out that Steve Wilks has ran a lot of historically with his defenses, right? And so we were kind of wondering, obviously we know it wasn't going to be Hufanga who was going to be back there. To Sean Gibson, I don't know how much experience with that he has in his career. It's definitely not really what he did last season. So because he's at the tail end of his career, this may very well be the last season he plays in the NFL. Did he really want to do that? So I don't know. Just in case, I feel like having Jair Brown, a guy who has experience with that and moving all around the field, I think it's going to be great for this defense. But let's talk about the next pick, right, guys? We're gonna get Jay to talk about kickers really quick. Jake Moody, I know you're thrilled about this one, Jay. Look, I'm gonna tell you this because obviously I was a little upset about this pick, like right off the bat, right? I mean, it's hard not to be. Yes, I know the 49ers did need a kicker. And I think I also knew that there was a real possibility of this happening, right? That they would draft Jake Moody. I'm just not sure that I saw that happening in the third round, much less with their second pick. Remember, they had 3 third-round picks. They could have waited till 102. No, they got Jake Moody with pick 99. Look, I get the logic that fourth round, it was pretty much the back end of the third round. So almost basically a fourth round pick, if you want to look at it like that. The 49ers get third round picks like nobody's business with all these, they've been awarded third round picks because of some of the coaches that have left. So maybe in that sense, they're like, what's another third round pick? We're addressing a need here. So fine. I see it in that regard. And Kyle Shanahan did say that he felt like they pretty much had starters all across the board, and the only position they felt they needed a starter was a kicker position. Also fair. Jake Moody, I mean, is or was the best kicker available in this draft, and so I get wanting to, draft him, and it seemed like Brian Schneider really, really liked him. And Adam Peters, after the draft, said that this was one of the most collaborative drafts that they've had with their coaches. So I think they were really leaning on the coaches to tell them, like, okay, which guys do you guys like? And, we'll kind of base our board or, our draft based on that. So I feel like the fact that Schneider, really liked Moody clearly was his preference for the kicker that they targeted in this draft. I'm going to sit back and just see how this plays out. You like the fact that, Moody, he has a lot of confidence. He has the ability to, he's played in a lot of really big games, and the 49ers see themselves in a lot of big games. So there's that. And then also he has experience in a lot of, in all kinds of weather. In Michigan, you deal with rain, sleet, and snow, and he has all that experience, and he excelled in those conditions. So I think, I'm just, like I said, I'm going to sit back, see how this plays out. Historically, I know that kickers, when they're drafted early, sometimes they go in the NFL and they turn into a pumpkin. We're hoping that Jake Moody, doesn't fall under that trend, right? And he actually is worth this pick.
Okay. So, Steph, I love you. I've got a lot going on right now. I don't know what my computer is doing right now at this point. It's like as soon as you mentioned Jake Moody, all of a sudden my computer started
crashing.
Crazy
oh,
and
convenient.
Yeah,
very convenient.
Right. I want to take Justin's donation. Appreciate you, Justin. I'm here to listen to Jason talk about the kicker. I've always agreed with your kicker takes 100%. And could have had McGuire or Freeland. Okay. So, Steph, I want to address your point about positional need, and I want to start there articulately, calmly, and tell you that when you go into a certain draft pick and you are just drafting for positional need and not looking at best player available, it tends to put you in a spot where that pick has to work immediately, right? You mentioned the history. The only other kicker that was drafted higher than Jake Moody, and there's only been 4 kickers past the 4th round that were picked, he's one of them, has gained a second contract with that team. That's Sebastian Janikowski. Roberto Aguayo was here today, gone tomorrow. Let's not also forget the fact that while I believe that now that we're talking about competitions, Jake Moody is going to have a leg up, haha, you like that, on Zane Gonzalez. Well, Gonzalez drills all his kicks, all of them, and his money from everywhere and doesn't miss. By the way, Jake Moody, 3 of 7 from 50 yards out. It's not exactly automatic. So stop telling me, oh, when you have a guy who can kick it from 60 yards out, that's Justin Tucker, and that's Justin Tucker only. when you look at what was left on the board, I have a bigger issue with it. And I'm speaking directly to the people who are trying to rationalize this pick with the New England Patriots taking a kicker, which they also drafted a punter, by the way. I think you're confusing Bill Belichick, the coach, with Bill Belichick, the GM. Let me explain. Bill Belichick, the coach, is far more successful than Bill Belichick, the GM. Bill Belichick, the GM, drafted N'Keal Harry, Chase Winovich, other receivers that just haven't panned out, other players that have not panned out. I would also like to ask you guys, since Tom Brady left, has Bill Belichick been able to do anything? That's just a question that I have. I'm talking about coach, right? Bill O'Brien gets ostracized all the time for being a bad GM, but he was actually a really good coach. Don't try to explain this pick to me by saying Bill Belichick did it. So can you complain with that? Yes, I can. Bill Belichick was dumb. The 49ers were dumb. This is not a good pick. Regardless of whether you believe this is a positional need, which is obvious, fine, I guess you did. For that, if you're telling me wasting pick 99 or signing Robbie Gould back for $5 million for 1 more year, I'm taking Robbie Gould for $5 million every single year, especially after the restructure with Christian McCaffrey. But when you look at the talent that was on the board, I mean, for God's sakes, Darnell Washington was almost on the board. Isaiah McGuire is an edge. Blake Freeland is an offensive tackle, which we're going to get to this and why they didn't address tackle at all. I think that was probably the most interesting nugget of this entire weekend was what they said afterwards and who they have, I guess, confidence in. I have a hard time putting this pick in a good spot when there was so much talent on the board. Blake Freeland, Isaiah McGuire, anybody. So this is why you guys think that I'm just railing on kickers, whatever it is. I would have a better time understanding this pick if the 49ers had picks in the first and second rounds. Mm-hmm. You had 3 picks in the third round. Each of those picks had to hit. Each of them had to hit. You have to have hits. You can't mess around because you didn't have a first and second round pick. So to play around with third round picks and say, oh, well, this was technically a fourth because of comp picks, No. Impact players, you draft them in the third round, they're cheap. They're going to be players that are going to impact your roster going down the line. One more thing before we get off of this kicker topic. I've seen people say, well, the 49ers have not been good in the third round regardless, so why not take a chance on a kicker? Steph, that is by far one of the most it's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. So you have not had success with third round picks aside from Fred Warner, and you've missed on multiple third round picks. And your solution for missing on those third round picks is to just say, I don't care about the pick anymore. I am just going to throw this pick away on a kicker. So instead of correcting your wrongs by trying to take a position of need and value, you said, well, because we've just been bad in third round picks, we're just going to take a kicker. I have a huge problem with that. I have a way bigger problem with that than you saying that's the best player we felt was available, in my opinion. Like, I would rather they had come out and said, that is literally the best player available that we saw on the board. I would disagree with that, but I would feel better about that than the whole idea of, well, we've missed on so many third round picks. It's time to just kick one away at this point. And shout out Niner Empire DMV for being a member. But yeah, I'm done, Steph. I'm done. When it becomes this whole discussion about Bill Belichick took this guy, I don't care. Bill Belichick can be wrong, and Bill Belichick has been wrong a bunch. Bill Belichick, the coach, is not Bill Belichick, the GM. So do not use the Patriots and their picks as a way to justify this pick, which I feel is a failure. And I probably have a bigger problem with the pick after this, Steph. And we can just turn right to that.
Yes. That's what I was going to ask you. Like, what which of these two picks are you more upset with? By the way, before we move on, I just wanted to point out the fact. So Jay, right before we went live, he said he was going to say little to nothing about about kickers. And what are we, like 5 minutes in talking about kickers? You just I was like looking at my watch in between, like when is he's still going?
Oh
I'm
my
just kidding.
God, man.
But
I love it so much.
I
I'm so
know
glad that you brought that up,
you
man.
because you can't help it. Like every
Nah,
time you're like, no, I'm not even gonna
nah.
talk about it, and then you
No,
just
well,
go on
look. All
this
right,
like
look.
rant.
Look, everybody understands that I value the kicker much differently than other people do because I feel like it's
And
one
that
of
you
the
don't
least.
value the
But
kicker at all.
pretty much at this point. I mean, for
Yeah,
God's sakes, all of the guys that are big in this league were guys that weren't drafted and turned it on later in their career. And then people want to turn around, well, you need to draft your franchise kicker. It's pretty stupid. But yeah, I mean, it enrages me just because there was so much talent on the board, right? This isn't a fifth, sixth round pick where, anything can happen. I would have felt way better about that. But pick 99, I'm good, man. Please, please.
but yeah, let's talk about the next pick because just 3 picks later, they picked a tight end, which was a position of need. They need depth there. We knew that they would draft a kicker at some point. I also kept saying like, okay, this is a position they could also double dip on. So given all of these things, they go out and they draft Alabama tight end Cameron Latu, who I personally think he would have been available way later in the 5th round, maybe even the 7th. If Braden Willis went in the 7th, I feel like Cameron Latu could have also been there available in the 7th. And I felt like there were other tight ends who were better that were still on the board. I mean, I'm pretty sure Will Mallory was still there, right? He's
Yes,
someone you liked, Jay. So in comparing both of these two picks, say what you want about the 49ers picking a kicker, but at least they picked the best kicker there was in the entire draft.
maybe.
With 102, Cameron Latu, not even the best tight end that was available at that spot. So
I agree.
I questioned this pick. I questioned the vision. Like they might have a vision for him. There might be something they like about him. Remember, we didn't really like the George Kittle pick, or maybe I shouldn't say that, but we didn't think that it was.
People weren't jumping for joy when George
Yeah, it
Kittle
was a
was
head
drafted.
scratcher. Like
Right.
we didn't know because we looked at the college production and
Mhm.
assumed like, okay, what is this? Like, what is he gonna do? There wasn't a lot there from the college standpoint in his production. It's kind of the same thing with Cameron Latu, and let's not forget he played at Alabama too, so it's not like he didn't have the opportunities, right? Granted, he wasn't the top, person in that offense, the top target, but, I think the point still stands that this was a little, maybe confusing. And I would almost call him a developmental tight end prospect. He didn't start playing tight end until 2019. Alabama recruited him as a defensive end, actually, coming out of high school. So, and also, if you look at his athleticism, usually when you're banking on someone, you're looking at traits. If he has crazy athleticism, you can't really fault the pick, right? But his athleticism is average. He isn't fast. 4.78 40. He's 6'4", so at 242 pounds. So it's not like he's huge either. So yeah, only bench 14. Strength also kind of a question mark. So I'm kind of wondering what they saw in this pick, and clearly it was someone that they really liked because to go for him in the 3rd round, if you look at all the other 2 picks, Jair Brown, who they traded up for, Jake Moody, who I was saying Schneider, was really banging the table for. What's the deal with Cameron Latu? Like, was this a Brian Fleury pick? I don't know. I'm still, I guess, kind of waiting to see how this one shakes out.
Yeah, and I guess I was blinded with what happened in '99 for me to not really fully understand what happened with Cameron Latu because I had to actually write about it on Niners Nation, so I went to it and I just remember what I saw and I just wasn't overly impressed. And when we were doing mocks, he was a guy that was ending up later and later on. I feel like as much as I fell a little bit on Zach Coombs, he was still available. Will
Mhm.
Mallory, who I loved, I think he was still available. Davis Allen from Clemson, he was still available. I mean, for God's sakes, Darnell Washington was almost available at 99. Like that's how far he was falling down. Um, Yeah, I mean, if this pick turns out to be great, then I understand it. But this one was a head scratcher. I have to say, draft grades don't mean much, but after the first three picks, I have to give the 49ers probably like a B minus C plus at the best. And that's only because of the last two picks. Jair Brown is a steal. Like, you started this draft off beautifully with Jair Brown. And I'm like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
here they go. Then you take a kicker, and then you take one of the lowest regarded tight ends right there in a spot where it felt like you were reaching a little bit. Yeah, this first day didn't really line up for me. And again, hindsight's a beautiful thing. Whatever, we're looking at it right now, but if we're a year or two down the line and Jake Moody is Justin Tucker reborn and Cameron Latu is Rob Gronkowski, then whatever. Like, who cares about the draft grade? But all we're going on right now is just what we see, what was on the board, what was there. So it's not necessarily hindsight since we're just coming off the weekend for it. But at the same time, that one was more of a head scratcher than anything because that was a position player. And again, you could have had another player. You could have had someone else. So that one was a little bit like Keely Ringo, like, was available. I mean, like, there were so many football players available for you to take in these two rounds and these two picks in this round. And then you walk away with a kicker and a guy who wasn't as highly regarded in Ladu. And it's just like, this one did not jive for me the entire way, Steph. This first day was a little bit of a disappointment. But I will say this.
What?
I love the rest of the draft. I
Yeah,
actually
me too.
love the rest of the draft. So we can get into that. I love the rest of the draft compared to how they started. How they started was a little bit of a head scratcher. Fine. It is what it
Roller
is.
coaster.
Again, say again.
It was a roller coaster. It started
Yeah.
off really high, and then you get on that dip. But yeah,
So
I mean, in round 5, they turned it around, and this is where historically they've kind of made their money, right? In terms of some of the picks that they've made in the 5th round, and so some of these guys I thought were pretty good value. I mean, Darrell Luter. We talked about the fact they needed corner depth. I was actually
love that.
surprised they only got one corner in this
Mhm.
entire draft. But I do like that pick. He's very aggressive, long-armed corner. I think historically that's something that Steve Wilkes has always, been attracted to for his corners, just like really long arms, length. And Luter's also very strong. One thing that Adam Peters says, he was the most mature guy they had met in the draft process. So that stands for something. Clearly, a cultural fit for the 49ers, and that's something they highly regard. So, yeah, it seemed also he stood out at the Senior Bowl, which the 49ers love the Senior Bowl and like scouting guys there. So this feels like a really good fit for this defense. And I'm excited to, he'll be depth, right, for this first year,
Mhm.
probably, maybe some special teams contributor. But I'm excited to see going forward what this pick will look like.
Speed, athleticism, length, those are all things that the 49ers like absolutely look at when it comes to cornerbacks. He's somebody who can contribute on special teams immediately, give them depth. And that was my biggest issue was after Lenore, after Ward, what do? You don't turn it back over to Ambry Thomas. You need to have guys that you can actually depend on at this point. And again, it's not my opinion on Ambry Thomas. Just ask the 49ers. They're like literally trying to play anybody but him at this point. But some of his stats, 4 interceptions, 10 pass breakups, 21 tackles, 2 for loss, and 10 starts in 2021 as a senior, 42 tackles and interceptions, 7 pass breakups, and 13 starts. At this point in the draft, you take chances on high athleticism, guys who can run fast, things like that have slid down. So I really like this. I always thought cornerback was something that the 49ers need to address, because I think we kind of had a foregone conclusion that Emmanuel Mosley was going to come back. But like Adam Peters said about Luter, he's a man already, and he impressed the heck out of me. That was probably the biggest thing that stuck out with Luter the most. So again, I like it. I like his speed. His profile is clear, something that the 49ers definitely look at when it comes to cornerbacks as Luter. So round 5, 173. Steph, we got a new metric. We got a new metric. And this is something that, again, when we talk about the 49ers are on the cutting edge of player evaluations and metrics and advanced analytics, we got the GTFO rating. Do you want to explain to our viewers who aren't familiar with what that metric is?
Well, usually the acronym means, get the fuck out.
Oh,
But in this
hey, this
case,
is a family show.
hey, I know, Rob, bleep it out. Bleep it out, Rob. But in this case, for the 49ers, it could mean that, but also I think it's more so related to get off, right?
Right.
Get the fuck off. So I think for them, they said that their R&D department can measure how quickly guys get 2 yards off the line or something like that. So clearly Robert Beal was the quickest. He had the highest GTFO grade in this draft. And also, John Lynch spoke about the fact that, Kirby Smart just had glowing reviews of Robert Beal, and Kirby Smart is someone who John Lynch, I think, trusts in that regard. So he was a part-time player at Georgia, but I think situationally he was very effective. Started 10 games out of 59 that he appeared in. So again, just had one role specifically, and I think he'll have just one role with this defensive line as well. And we know that Chris Koserig loves to just find a role for guys, and he'll find something for them. So I think we were talking about the fact that the 49ers needed a speed rusher. Yaya Diaby, went pretty early. He went before their third round picks. I think they would have liked Diaby with one of those third round picks, by the way, but you don't get him. So you wait. Isaiah McGuire, we talked about the fact he was available. Obviously, they didn't like him at that spot. So I think Robert Beal in the 5th round, I think that's great value for being able to find a speed rush guy, 4.4740. He has long arms as well. And he grew up watching Alden Smith. So, hey, makes
We're
me
old.
feel a little old. Yeah, it makes me feel a little old. But hey, if you're watching Alden Smith and can grab some things out of his game, or Nick Bosa as well, you're already off to a good start.
Yeah, absolutely. Speed rusher, a guy who I think his draft stock was because of, or where it was because of him being a rotational guy and not playing much. But in 15 games that he played last year, 26 total stops, 20 quarterback pressures in his senior year, 4 tackles and a quarterback strip sack in the national title game. One of the few Georgia players that didn't end up being a Philadelphia Eagle somehow. I mean, I don't understand it. Like, you could have taken an elevator ride in Georgia or had lunch in one of those rooms, and Howie Roseman's on the phone looking for you. But yeah, again, speed rusher fills a role, again, rotational. I do think that where you see him selected means that the 49ers have big stock in what Drake Jackson's about to do. Mm-hmm. He's going to need to step up immediately. We do have something else to talk about that pertains to that, but I do think when you look at the way that the 49ers drafted, it tells you two things. One, Colton McKivitz is that guy. He's the big man on campus. He's that guy. They love him at right tackle already. He hasn't even really played much, but they love him. And also, there's a possibility that the 49ers address this position later on, but they're good with what they have, and I think they're banking on Drake Jackson. So let's move on to round 6, 216th overall, D. Winters, TCU. Now, I mean, when you look at what the 49ers value, again, in linebackers, and I think this was a masterclass in what we kind of known about how the 49ers evaluate talent and what they like in their players. Stop me if you've heard this before. Safety converted to linebacker, very fast, plays with his hair on fire, most valuable player in the playoff semifinal, 7 tackles, 3 for loss, 29 interception return, and a pass breakup in the win against Michigan. Steph, doesn't that feel like Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, he's in.
He's such a Niner.
Yeah.
Such a Niner. And if you look at all the linebackers that the 49ers have drafted within this regime, they've all had that similar mold, right? The safety linebacker converter hybrid, right? And kind of vice versa. It kind of goes both ways. Like, you look at Hufanga, who very plays in the box as well. So they kind of like their guys to be able to do both. And I really like this pick. When I was at the Senior Bowl, there was 2 linebackers that stood out to me. One of them was Marty Mayhew. The other one was D. Winters. Both of them, I looked at both of them and I was like, these guys look like Niners. Like, just the way that they play linebacker, they look like Niners. So those were 2 guys that I really liked going into the process. And I was like, if the 49ers go for a linebacker, I want one of either of these 2 guys. Marty Mayhew went pretty early. So D. Winters, again, in the 6th round, like, I felt like that was great value. And because this is such a great fit, maybe other teams weren't seeing it as much, but I think this is a great fit for the 49ers. So to me, this could potentially be a steal. And John Lynch said about Winters, comparisons are dangerous because you have to go do it, but he has similar traits to Dre Greenlaw. So I mean, yeah, you got to bank on that. And, as part of TCU's defense, he tied Dylan Horton for the team lead with 14 and a half tackles for loss, and he placed second with 7.5 sacks. So, he could be effective going after the quarterback as well. Played some wide receiver in high school. So we talk about like the athletic traits as well. And that's really what you bank on. And I have no worries at all about the 49ers, scouting linebackers. This is one of the positions that they nail every single time. So I'm really excited to see what D Winters is going to look like in this defense.
Yeah, 100%. And again, it looks like a Niner, right? It looks like somebody that they have. He's just such a Niner. He just fits in right there. And a little bit to the Dre Greenlaw point. Sometimes Dre Greenlaw would play with such a fast motor that he would move himself out. And that was one of the things out of plays, right? Like out of run plays and at times. That's a little bit of what D Winters has, but you can't teach effort. And I think that's what the 49ers are excited about when it comes to Greenlaw, when it comes to Winters. It's like we can curb that. We can turn that into a positive. Effort isn't something you can teach. You either have it or you don't. And both of these guys seem to have it. And that's why Dre Greenlaw was able to turn in such a great season. Hopefully, Dre and D kind of works together, man. It really does. Like it's just one letter apart. Whatever. Let's move on. Braden Willis, who you got to speak with a lot at the combine. So I'm going to let you cook a little bit on this as well.
Yeah, man. I'm so excited that they made this pick. I was actually so scared because right before this pick was coming, Braden Willis was there for them, right? And I saw Aaron Wilson, who covers like the Texans. He actually tweeted because the Texans picked right before the Niners, and he tweeted that the Texans had selected Braden Willis. And I was like, no, but I obviously it was a mistake. I don't even know who the Texans ended up getting after that. But then I saw the tweets flooding in that the 49ers had selected him, and I was like, oh my God, yes, I have been banging the table for Braden Willis throughout this entire process. Every time I was on people's shows and they were like, who do you think like the 49ers could realistically draft out of this group, blah, 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 I would always say Braden Willis. And because I latched on to what he said about the 49ers at the combine when I interviewed him, I asked him, had you met with the 49ers? He said yes. And unprompted, he said, I love them, they love me. You never get those type of responses usually from players, especially in a setting like the combine where you're kind of, just trying to keep everything equal. You're not really leaning towards any particular team. But for him to say that, and not only for him to say that he loves the Niners, but they love him as well, I think that, spoke to how interested they were in him. And, I always felt like that was a possibility. To get him in the 7th round, I felt like that was a steal. And honestly, I feel like, not a lot of people know about Braden Willis, but he's very versatile. You can line him up anywhere, really. And 2022 was his first year as a full-time starter at Oklahoma. He had 7 touchdowns on 39 receptions. You do the math. That's some pretty good touchdown odds right there. And his 7 touchdowns led the team last season. So, and again, that was his first year as a starter in that offense. So think about what he can do, when he gets more opportunities. And coming out of college, his career stats are very similar to that of George Kittle. And, not to compare too much, these two players, but I think when you look at, he hasn't really hit his stride yet. He hasn't really hit his ceiling yet, right? So Braden Willis, I think, is going to be someone who develops into a weapon for this team, and I'm really, really excited. Yeah, Peyton said he had Braden Willis ranked over Latu. I 100% feel the exact same way, which is kind of weird. Like, had Braden Willis been the 3rd round pick, let me just pretend that Braden Willis was picked in the 3rd round. That would have made sense. And then let me just pretend that Latu was that 7th round pick. And maybe I feel a little better, right? If you just switch those things around.
You feel a little bit better. You feel a little bit better
at the end of the day.
Right. And you feel a little bit better, right? Braden Willis, I thought you could have later on as well too. But in this regard, and this is where I'm going to put my spin on it because I think you've done an incredible job being able to speak with him and peel back the curtain a little bit. He feels like maybe a Kyle Juszczyk replacement in case, God forbid, he gets injured or if he moves on from the team, can play a little H-back. But he also feels like a guy who offers you the run blocking that you so desperately need as 49er fans, right? Every tight end has to run block, even though Ross Dwelly's still on his team for the 6th straight year. He can offer you that, but he can offer you the upside of his hands that Charlie Warner can't. So this really feels like the move at tight end that's got me a little bit more excited. This is why I wanted them to pair someone like Will Mallory with someone like this, because in many of the mocks that I did, I took 2 tight ends thinking
Yeah.
you need to double up on this position. The reason is you get yourself that run blocker, but get yourself an offensive weapon also, like Will Mallory, like somebody else that can run down the field and run past people, have yards after the catch. Like, find ways to create more mismatches. And I think, again, with Braden Willis, the versatility that he offers in terms of where he can line up, you're absolutely right about. But he also could be the guy that you sneak in bunch tight end formations. He looks like he's about to block, but he can sneak out and actually catch the ball, unlike Charlie Warner. So I love this one. This one probably feels like the better of the two moves, not only just because of value, but the player wise. So again, man, like, the first day bothered me, but as more as you go along, and it doesn't really matter where you draft these guys, right, at this point, as long as they produce, I felt way better about the draft later on and who they've taken. Most of these players felt like they were really who they honed in on in terms of skill set and what we've seen. The first three felt like the first one was correct, right? Like, I love the Jair Brown thing. The other ones were just like, well, we got to address the position of need. And they must have really liked Cameron Ladu for some reason.
For reasons we don't know yet.
We don't know.
Guess.
We don't know. But Peyton said the same thing. I had Braden Willis over Latu. Let's turn to the 49ers addressing wide receiver. So a lot of talk this week
really quickly before we move on to Ronnie Bell. One more thing about Braden Willis I want to say. You talked about the fact, he could play fullback. Yeah, he could do a bunch of things. You didn't even mention the fact he could play wildcat.
Yep, quarterback. I mean,
he could do it.
I mean, instead of trading quarterbacks, you bring in more.
Give him the Jerick McKinnon package.
Hey, slow down. Super Bowl champion Jerick McKinnon. Make sure you get it right. And he's also back with that team. You know, the Chiefs locking in their quarterback one this late in the process is something that, again, we have to give them credits for at this point. That's for you guys that don't understand the inside joke between Steph and I. But round 7, 253, the 49ers finally address wide receiver. This whole talk this entire week, Brandon Ayuk, is he going to get his 5th-year option picked up? Yes, 5th-year option was picked up, right? Like, it makes complete sense. Well, is he going to be traded? Well, no, he wasn't traded. But you also do have to address the position still, right? There's 6 guys that make this team. You can probably set your watch to Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Jawan Jennings, Ray McLeod, Danny Gray. That's 5. Steph, does Ronnie Bell have a chance to be that 6th receiver?
I think he has a chance for sure. I mean, he definitely, what gives the guys the chance when they're at the bottom of the depth chart, you play special teams. What other value do you bring besides playing that one position, right? And he does have that special teams ability. Yes, they already have a returner, but I feel like, he could still contribute in that aspect on special teams, right? So I think this is a great pick. He was a team captain. Again, going back to what the 49ers typically like. They like leaders. They like guys who are culture fits. And so Ronnie Bell, definitely one of them. I was joking around on my podcast yesterday because I was when I have to do my thumbnails for my videos, I got to look up some of these players, right? And so I looked at Ronnie Bell's images. If you look at Ronnie Bell's Google images, you'll just see him making some acrobatic catches. He's got a dude in his face, but he's catching it with, his fingertips. And he, to me, I tweeted out last night, if I had to do a scouting report on Ronnie Bell just based on his pictures, I'd tell you, like, he's got concentration. He could go after the ball. He has fantastic body control, all these things. And I think all those things are true. I haven't really even dived into the tape, but all I've read about him are these things as well. So I thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, definitely is going to be a fit. And I could see him being the heir apparent to Jawan Jennings eventually.
Love that you said that, because that's where I was going with it, just in case. Again, maybe Brandon Ayuk's here next year. Maybe he's not. I don't know. I can't speculate on that. I know he's going to be here this year. But yeah, you have to insulate yourself with more. Ronnie Bell looks like a Kyle Shanahan receiver. Guy who's shifty, can get himself open here and there, like at the last moment. Contested catch guy, can play in the slot. He's got that dog in him. And like what Shanahan said, he can fit into any position. And he seemed like one of the more reliable wideouts that we had watched in all of college football. Remember, catch the football. No block, no rock. It only goes. That's only a rule for wide receivers, but Ronnie Bell can do all of those things. I really like that pick as well, too. And then the 49ers addressed linebacker one more time. Jalen Graham out of Purdue. First of all, boo Purdue. Let's go Hoosiers. But we're not here to talk about like personal biases here. Steph, what's your overall takeaway with Jalen Graham?
So once again, a guy who has experience, I think with safety as well, if I'm not mistaken, Jalen Graham started all but one game in his collegiate career. So he has a ton of experience. And I think that's great as well, because again, at the end of the draft, you're banking on traits, you're banking on certain things. And I think experience is probably what they're banking on with Jalen Graham. And like I said, they've hit on pretty much every linebacker they have ever drafted. Even the undrafted free agents have looked pretty good. So I like this pick. I'm not mad at it at all. Career stats for Jalen Graham: 169 tackles, 12 and a half for loss, 3 forced fumbles, 2 sacks, 3 interceptions. So, I really like this one. And what Lynch said about Graham, we were torn between D. Winters and Jalen Graham. Ultimately, D. Winters beat him out. When Jalen is still there at the end, you go get Jalen Graham. We like them both. So I think in the 49ers mind, say what you want about the, draft grade and all that. I know a lot of people aren't a big fan of the 49ers draft, looking from the outside in, right? But I feel like the 49ers, they really love their draft. Like, if you had Jalen Graham and D. Winters and you were able to get both of them, if you had Cameron Latu and Braden Willis and you were able to get both of them, I think, for them, they probably felt like a lot of talent that was on their board fell to them, right? And so it's all about perspective, and I like this pick for the 49ers.
Yeah, me too. Again, linebacker, speed guy who can contribute. Right now, I mean, after Drake Greenlaw, it's Marcelino McQuarrie Ball, who's very fast as well, too. I know the 49ers are high on him as well. And you have Demetrius Flanagan Fowles. Something about this team and 3 names and hyphenated names that get you automatically Ty Davis Price, Marcelino McQuarrie Ball, Demetrius Flanagan
He's
Fowles.
a Niner.
Yeah, so there's such Niners when it comes to that. But yeah, this one makes sense. Again, day 1 bothered me, or day 2 bothered me. Day 2 bothered me especially with the last 2 picks. But later on, I felt like this draft really, really took shape, and I really enjoyed some of the picks that were there as well too. Steph, before the draft happened, though, we got some news about a restructure of a contract, which was actually Christian McCaffrey, which put aside, I think it was like $8 to $10 million, right? Like now the 49ers are in that $8 to $10 million salary cap range, 8.5, right?
Yeah.
So obviously the first speculation is, oh my God, trading Trey Lance, man. There we go. They can take the dead cap hit on now. But that didn't happen. But Steph, where I'm going with this is, you only needed about $2 or $3 million to take on your entire draft class.
Yep.
There's a lot of money left over. Are the 49ers ready to add somebody in free agency that's still out there? There's a ton of talent still out there for the 49ers, particularly at edge, to add. Is that what the 49ers are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a lot of talent available. I don't know if that's what they're doing. They definitely didn't need to make this move, as you mentioned, to sign their draft class. But maybe they're using this for, just to have money to spend throughout the season. You never know what can happen. But usually when you restructure a contract, and at this point, it's like you need the money now. I feel like that's usually when restructures happen. I don't know. We could see some signings happen, I think, before training camp. I think if you recall, Tashawn Gibson, was signed right before training camp, albeit that was when believe Jimmy Ward was hurt at that point.
We
but
didn't know
you never
how
know,
long
right?
Jimmy Ward was going to be, right? With Gibson, we thought it was just going to be a 1 year, 1 game thing, just insurance.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think the 49ers could go bargain shopping again. Compensatory formula doesn't really count at this point. So it's smart for them to have waited until after the draft. And to your point, there is a lot of edge talent still out there. Frank Clark, Yannick, Leonard Floyd still out there. Even Clowney is still out there, right? So I think there's a lot of great talent for the 49ers to potentially bring in some other guys. And maybe they look at other positions besides, edge, right? We talked about the fact they need a lot of corner depth. Well, they only drafted 1 corner. Maybe they want to get a free agent corner. I believe Marcus Peters still available.
Marcus Peters is still available.
At that point, like as depth, that's not a bad signing, right? So I would definitely consider some of that, and we'll see what they do. But I am expecting them to probably bring in a couple more bodies.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this does feel like a little bit of opening things up just in case during the season. If you need a piece and someone is willing to move somebody, we've seen the 49ers kind of do that. Still got to sign Bosa. So I saw that Peyton put that up.
Yep.
It is, but Nick Bosa when he signs his extension, he's not going to count much for the cap this year. So when they signed him, they didn't necessarily need cap space this year. The cap hits come in the year after. So they can still, like Nick Bosa is somebody who is probably going to get his extension right before training camp starts. We've seen that
Mm-hmm.
happen. Debo Samuel, all those things have kind of worked themselves out in that way. So that's one way to look at it. But I do think it's two things. It is one, keeping yourself open and flexible just in case there is a piece that becomes available from a team that's not contending at this point that can help put you over the top. And also, I do think you should really, really go for an edge. You said Yannick Ngakoue, Justin Houston, who I've been banging the table for. I mean, there's a lot of guys there that can help you right now while you get guys going, right? We talked about Beal. He's a fifth rounder. Doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to contribute right away. Doesn't mean that you should write him off. But the 49ers have been insulating themselves, right? So that's why, like, I kind of joke with you in our pregame, our pre-podcast text messages where I said, bring in more kickers and long snappers because you never know who's going to get hurt, right? Like, that's what you do with quarterbacks and everything as well, too. The war of attrition happens quickly in this league, and you never know when it's going to happen. So bringing in reliable pieces, guys that can contribute, like Justin Houston, Yannick Ngakoue, you mentioned Leonard Floyd, you mentioned Jadeveon Clowney. Those are the things and those are the types of players that fit what the 49ers are doing. They're close. None of those guys are going anywhere to rebuild. None of them were getting a bag. Many of them probably put off signing because they didn't want to get into OTAs and mini camp and all that stuff. And they were just like, well, just fast forward me to training camp. And they've afforded themselves those rights because they have been in the league so long and they're professionals. But yeah, I definitely think that there's something to do with edge. And Kenny asks, why does every team hate Yannick? This will be 6 teams in 8 years or whatever. I have an unpopular opinion about Yannick that I want to get off real quick. I mean, it feels like all of my opinions are unpopular at this point, so I might as well just stop saying that. I just might as well just say I have an opinion. Last year, Yannick played fine for the Colts, but it wasn't like he was absolutely dominating, right? Like off the snap. Like, and if you guys go back and watch, some were coverage sacks, somewhere the quarterback holding it a little bit too long, some were just straight up hustle plays, which hustle plays shouldn't go against him. But that's the point, right? And this is what I've been saying about Yannick. If he was so great, if the Colts loved him so much, they replaced him with Samson Ebukam. And they gave Samson the bag. They immediately moved off him. I don't want to speculate about why teams aren't in on them because sometimes I think fans, what they lose is if someone goes unsigned, if someone's unsigned for long, they're like, oh, the league hates them. Sometimes players say, I'm not taking any calls. I'm not taking any deals right now. I've got this, and this going on. Or I don't feel like playing football right now. So there are different factors when it comes into that. But somebody who 49er fans can't stop mentioning, why did Indianapolis just say, oh, we're good, man. We're going to go with Samson Ebukam and pay him more than we paid you? That's kind of a red flag for me. If he was so great, the Colts would have been all over him. Not that he won't be great here. He would be a rotational piece. But the unique thing is gotten in the way of it's a name. It's more of a name. And it's gotten in the way of like rational discussion about his play. That's why I like Justin Houston. Justin Houston's a hired gun, 1 year, pass rushing specialist, only on passing downs. I think you can get him for cheaper than you could for Yannick Ngakoue. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really where I'm at with it. But the 49ers still have an opportunity right now. When you see them not go edge much early in the early rounds, that was a big thing to me that was saying this team has a plan to sign somebody else afterwards.
I love the same.
And for somebody who builds in the trenches, Clelin Ferrell and Austin Bryant aren't exactly the needle movers that you need. You need rotational guys. And I think that there's something to that. So again, I see Justin Houston's stuff up here. Justin Houston was an every down player 2 years ago with the Baltimore Ravens, had decent sack numbers. They put him in a pass rushing role and his pressures and his sacks almost like doubled. And he's just a guy, go get the quarterback. Stop playing him on every down. You have other players that can play on every down. He is there in obvious passing situations to go get the quarterback. I like Justin Houston a lot.
Yeah, I mean, they got options, and that's the beauty of this at this point after the draft when there's still a lot of free agents available is having options. And so, I think the 49ers are going to pick someone who they feel is best for their team. To your point, Jay, maybe Yannick's not that guy. And as some people are maybe suggesting in the comments, maybe it's a culture thing, maybe it's a character thing, right? So that's also possible. But yeah, I mean, I fully expect them to make a move here, and I'm pretty excited. I mean, not to dive into the undrafted free agents a bit, but they did. I was kind of wondering like about interior defensive linemen as well, because I felt like they could have used some depth there as well. And they didn't bring anyone in. Spencer Wagey at a NDSU is someone who they can move on the inside. He played defensive end for North Dakota State for the most part, but he could play on the inside as well. So that's someone who they can, potentially bring in as depth too. But, some of these undrafted free agents don't always stick, but that's why I think it's always good to also look at some of the free agents who are out there who already have the NFL experience.
That's the thing is like there's people that have been draft capital and they don't start the first year. Jawan Jennings is somebody that you can think of, whether it's injury or not, whatever it is. But when the later rounds happen, you have more of a chance to cut those guys, which is why, if you took Jake Moody in the third round, he better start. Oh my God, he better start.
Oh my God. But you know what, Jay? Again, we're not going to go too deep into the undrafted free agents, but as of right now, like I'm a little surprised that the 49ers haven't brought in a quarterback. I was expecting that they would probably get one at like towards the end, sixth round, maybe seventh round. But they didn't even pick one up as a priority free agent. So I'm a little surprised. There was a couple of guys that were available that I wouldn't have been mad at all if they brought in as part of their UDFA class. And if I'm not mistaken, I think they still have a few roster spots, still available even after this initial list of undrafted free agents came out. So I think John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan both expressed that they would like to bring one in. But I don't know when that's going to happen because most of the guys who, were priority free agents after the draft have already been picked up. So then who's really there for you as a quarterback option? Well, I'll wait and see, but I'm wondering if they'll get someone else.
Yeah, Kyle Shanahan on the fourth quarterback said, we'd love to get a fourth guy here. We'll see which one it is. We'll be all right, though, in the offseason. We'll get to training camp. Hopefully we get QB1 Brock back soon.
He did not say QB1, just to clarify.
Him just mentioning Brock immediately.
Yeah, no, for sure. But
him just mentioning Brock immediately as quarterback one. But
I know. But people, because people won't believe that. People are going to be on Twitter like Jay said that Kyle said he called Brock.
Kyle and John have been saying it in no uncertain terms.
No, I
Stop
know,
it, guys. All right, but Steph, I think what we should have learned about this quarterback stuff is, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have been saying we love our quarterback room. Maybe we should start listening to them. Maybe there's no secret message behind that. Maybe they were looking at all the options as they usually do, but maybe there's no secret message to we're excited for Trey and Sam to compete. We want Brock back. Maybe listen instead of being detectives and trying to decipher every little thing. In my opinion, as usual, they make statements that are based on the present while insulating themselves for later on by saying things like, we look at all the possibilities. That's them telling you, hey, we are looking at that. But we love the guys that we have in that room, Sam and Trey and Brock. This is why everybody's talking about what they said. What they say is very matter of fact. Sometimes we should step away from the body language. We should step away from deciphering words and actually listen, because they always tell you kind of what they want to do. Bobby, I can't admit that they were going to trade Trey last week because I never believed that. I never once believed that.
Neither of us
never once believed that
at all.
And to go back to, because the cap space thing was something that was speculated on, where people were saying, well, how did you not know that you could restructure and then they could trade Trey? After June 1st, that cap hit is like $1 million. Why did you need to restructure to open up a bunch of cap space if you can still wait 1 month, 1 calendar month, if you really wanted to trade Trey Lance and not have any dead cap? Guys, let's start to put our thinking caps on. The tea leaves sometimes are Aaron Rodgers tea leaves. They're not giving you the right information. It's all there in front of you if you just want to choose to logically look at it. That's it. That's all I'm going to say about it. But, Steph, one more thing before we go. The 49ers didn't address offensive tackle at all. Colton McKivitz, come on down. You are that guy, pal. How are we feeling?
I'm feeling that I'm gonna wait to see how this plays out, right? In the past they've done this before where everyone thinks that they have this position of need. Last year it was safety, and it was also what was it? There was another center. Everyone was like they got to draft a center. They need to draft a center. But they did not. They stuck with Jake Brendel and see how that worked out. I mean, it wasn't a bad move. He was a very solid center for them, and I think they're looking at the same thing for Colton McKivitz, right? Before the draft, I was kind of thinking I was changing, my kind of outlook on whether they would take a tackle or not, because Matt Mayoko on the 49ers Talk podcast brought up the very great fact that if they were considering trading Mike McGlinchey last season, that tells you they would have been fine, even then, of having Colton McKivitz be the starter at right tackle. So they like Colton McKivitz.
100%.
So I think that's a vote of confidence. The fact that they did not go tackle, in this draft, another vote of confidence. And I'll also point out, Adam Peters and Tariq Ahmad had a post-draft, presser, and pretty much Tariq Ahmad said that they, in addition to scouting, this class, and they look at all the players, they also scout against their current roster. So they got to look at, okay, are these guys better than who we have? And ultimately, they came away thinking that no, none of these tackles, Blake Freeland was there for them, I think 3 separate times, right, when they picked in the 3rd round. Clearly not someone that they felt, could beat out any of the guys that they currently had, including Matt Pryor, including Jalen Moore, right, left tackle, who they could potentially, try to see what he looks like on the right this off season as well. But also John Lynch pointed out the fact that, we saw a big run of tackles go in like the first 2 rounds, and he's right about that. So I think a lot of the, day one or guys who probably they felt could have potentially beat out some of the guys on the roster probably won in the first round, right? So at that point, after that, you say, okay, let's pivot to something else. So I think, they weren't really convinced of the tackles that were available for them when they picked, and I'm okay with that. Like we said, Colton McKivit's going to be that guy, and I'm going to give him that chance because ultimately in the past when they've done this and they've had depth guys move up to starting roles, it has worked out. So I'm just going to hold my judgment and see what he looks like in training camp.
100%. And again, last year we had all this worry about the interior line. What is Banks going to look like? What's Brendel going to look like? What's Burford going to look like? And I think that worked out pretty well. So I do think we do owe them a little bit of benefit of the doubt. My only concern would be injury, but again, you bring in Feliciano, who Feliciano can pull in for right guard. You can move Burford back out to right tackle. They have a lot of possibilities on the table. So a lot of the draft press conference afterwards was centered around Colton McKivitz. Like it was almost like they just drafted Colton McKivitz, and they were talking about how much they loved him. So I just found that interesting. Like when I looked through the transcript, the thing that jumped out at me was there were 3 questions in the middle, and it was all about Colton McKivitz. So again, vote of confidence. They said that that's how they felt about Jake Brendel at the time, who had started only 3 games. So we do owe them the benefit of the doubt when it comes to that. And we've also seen them be competent on offense with a right tackle, Tom Compton, at times.
Nice.
So, Kyle Shanahan can find ways to, you like that, right? Kyle Shanahan can find ways to get around those sort of things. It's not like he's going to leave a right tackle on an island, anything like that. The offense will continue to function in a way, and again, McKivitz played in week 17 in a do or die game for Trent Williams. He was largely fine. And even Trent Williams kind of, hinted at, I probably shouldn't have played in that NFC title game, and maybe he might have done better. But, again, the past is the past, but they do have a great deal of confidence in Colton McKivitz. That's what I walked away with, not only with the draft choices, but with their words. Their words are just plain black and white, is smack dab in the middle. Steph, almost an hour. Thank you for your time. I understand you're very busy. You're about to do some more draft prospect stuff, right? Like you're gonna, do any
I'm
more
done,
interviews, anything
man.
like that? Nope, you're
No,
done.
I'm
No, done,
done.
man. No,
Dunzo.
honestly, I want to say now that the draft is over, um, your coverage this entire draft with prospects, the tracker, invaluable to all of us. You've been doing a hell of a job. It's been amazing to watch you grow, Steph, and I'm so happy to do this with you and just be able to watch one of my friends really really ascend this past year. So let's give it up for Steph Sanchez, everybody. We're gonna do drink champs. Let's go. We gotta give it up for Steph. Everybody's just laughing. But yeah, for sure. I just want to
Thank
make
you.
sure you get your flowers as well too. You crushed it this entire draft season.
Thank you. I don't know what to do with myself anymore. Like now that the
What do I
draft
do with
is
my hands?
over, like trying to pivot over to
I don't know what to do with my hands.
yeah.
I guess
so,
we should just start analyzing the draft picks, but at the same time,
Yeah.
this is a fun time because we're getting closer. I think in about a week or two, we're gonna get the schedule. Then we have a ton of stuff that we can talk about in terms of like we can just start saying Niners 17-0, 20-0, all the way to the chip, like no questions asked. Like we can just start giving out those sort of predictions and everything as well too. But yeah, that's gonna do it for this episode of Bully Ball. I'm Jason Aponte. That's Steph Sanchez. Make sure you are subscribed to Gold Standard Podcast Network wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you follow Steph on Twitter at Steph49K. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Jason Aponte2103, and on Twitter GS Podcasts and GSN 49ers on Instagram. For Steph Sanchez, for Jason Aponte, we're out of here.